Hey, this is Brent Jensen. You're listening to No Sleep Till Sudbury, the show where we talk about the music that makes your skin vibrate. This show is brought to you by Foray Pickups, handcrafting the very best guitar pickups all the way down in Detroit, Rock City. Check them out at foraypickups.com. And to support the No Sleep Till Sudbury show on Patreon, visit patreon.com/Brent Jensen Music. Folks, this week, Coney Hatch singer Andy Curran calls in to talk about his exciting new musical project called Envy of None. The band also features Rush guitarist Alex Lifeson, and the new record drops April 8. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Andy Curran. Andy Curran, how are you, buddy?
Brent, I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. I think I'm through the crazy blizzard snow action that we got here in southern Ontario. It kind of reminded me of when I was a kid, you know, when the snow was up to my knees. I mean, we shouldn't complain because we're Canadian, but man, you know, anybody that kind of lives out sort of that Oakville, Burlington, Hamilton, Niagara Falls, we got hammered, and we're slowly thawing out. And I'll share a quick story with you.
Sure.
I'm still playing as much ice hockey as I can, but I've got sort of like this storage shed right beside my house where all my hockey equipment is, and the door was frozen solid. I had to pick out my hockey gear like with an ice pick just to get it out. But I think I'm through the worst of it. So, but no, all good. I can't complain. The family's healthy and happy. I think we might be a unicorn family that don't want to jinx us, but none of us have been affected by COVID. So,
Good.
you know, I counting my blessings today.
Good for you. That's good to hear. That's a very Canadian story for your hockey gear.
Yeah. And when they closed down all the rinks, I was like, oh, where's an outdoor rink that I can play? So I found some buddies of mine found an outdoor rink in Etobicoke at Martin Grove and Rexdale. So
Yeah.
I did some outdoor skating there and did a little bit of pond hockey around the corner, playing with, you know, 10 and 15-year-old kids that were dangling, and they're like, who's this old guy coming up, right, with all his hockey gear? But I needed my hockey fix when they closed everything down, Brent.
That's great. Shinny hockey.
Yeah.
Those were the days, man. I used to do the same thing.
Yeah, they like to call it stick and puck where I live. Yeah.
Huh. Are you familiar with the term shinny? Of course you are.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Those were the days.
Yeah,
man.
most of my hockey is shinny. I don't play in any leagues. It's kind of like beer league. I try to get out 3 times a week, and it's with a bunch of good friends. Some of them are musicians. Some of them, you know, razz me about being an old school rocker and ask me to regale them with road stories from Coney Hatch and stuff like that. But no, I'm a full shinny hockey guy. I'm not an organized league hockey guy. I think the adult safe hockey is it's anything but safe.
Oh, I've heard.
And I'm 150 pounds wet out of the shower, Brent. So I can't afford to get snapped in half, you know.
Well, I'm glad you're still doing it. That's great.
Yeah, no, it keeps, you know, my dearly departed dad, who he played a lot of golf and tennis, you know, and he used to encourage me to just say, you know, Andy, you need that time away from all the rat race just to, you know, if you chase around a puck for an hour, all your troubles are gone. You're just focused on chasing that stupid little puck around, or that golf ball, or that tennis. So I find it really therapeutic. It's kind of one of my few vices that I have left. And as I get older, my wife is like, do you really need to play hockey 3 times a week? And I'm like, hell yeah. If I could do it 4, I would. Right.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No,
yeah.
I get that. I remember you telling me last time that you used to play tennis with Steve Harris, which I thought was great. Yeah. But it's just a nice escape from the rigors of the road.
It absolutely is. And speaking of Steve Harris, I talked to him, you know, just after the new year, and we were talking about Iron Maiden coming to Toronto, and he said, hey, did you think Geddy and Alex will be around? Because we had a doubles match with Steve and myself versus Geddy and Alex. And I said, I'll certainly put out the invitation. But like I find, you know, Brent, and you've talked to a lot of musicians. Sure, we love talking about our projects and music and our influences and all that kind of stuff. But if you find a passion, play with some of these artists, like Alex Lifeson is a huge golfer.
Mm-hmm.
Geddy Lee, he loves baseball. Steve Harris loves soccer. I just happen to be a hockey fanatic, right? And very easy to distract us and send us down the other roads of our passion, right? So, sports and especially hockey, if I, growing up as a Canadian kid, if I had my way, if you said to me, Andy, did you always dream of being a musician? It would be no. I wanted to be in the NHL, and probably a million other Canadian kids felt the same way. But the bigger kids got and the skinnier I got, I realized that there was not a career for me at the
NHL. Funny story about Alex. A friend of mine, a good friend of mine, sold his house recently. And, there were pictures on the internet, stuff like that. It was listed under his wife's name, obviously, because he wanted to keep it private. But he said, I think this is Alex Lifeson's house. And I was looking through and I said, yes, it is, because it was obviously a beautiful place. You've probably been there. But there was a room in the back. It was a wine tasting area. And he had a little trophy that if you look closely, you could see that he had his name on it. And it was a hole-in-one plaque.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, from the course. And it just happened, I think, 2 years ago.
Well, I do know because, obviously I'm in touch with Alex so much these days for a variety of reasons, but envy of none being one of them. But he did tell me that he did sell his home recently. And I think if it's the same place that we're talking about, he had a beautiful wine tasting room. He had a full-on man cave with his studio and all his guitars and everything, right? Mm-hmm. So it sounds like it's the same place, Brent.
Yeah, it was funny at that little plaque. I think it was like the 7th hole or something like that, and it showed what the yardage was and what club he used. So he had it up on the wall.
Well, I know one of the topics that you want to talk about today is envy of none, and our only sort of impediment or obstacle as we were finishing the records was working around Alex Lifeson's golf schedule.
That's so funny.
Al, when can you put some guitars on? Well, I've got, honestly, I'm not even kidding. He was playing 4 times a week. Like, he is a golf junkie, right? Yeah. So when we were getting to the end of the record and we had some deadlines and there was literally, if you guys want this record out this year, this is when you guys have, the label was telling us you have to deliver it by such and such a date. And the process that we had was a lot of times, I was, I guess, initiating the ideas and starting them off from ground zero and working on them with Maya Wynn, who's the vocalist, and sending them over to Al Fanabolini, who's a really good buddy of mine, and he's an amazing mixer, recording engineer, programmer, plays keyboards and guitar. But a lot of times Alex was reluctant to put his guitar parts on until he heard Maya's vocals. So we would be working back and forth, and then she would drop a vocal track on as a guide for Alex, and I would constantly be texting him going, okay, buddy, Maya sent her vocal over. When do you think you might be able to get the guitars so that we can mix this? And then the golf schedule came in. Well, I'm playing Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. I might be able to get to it by Saturday. So we're all just like waiting with bated breath. But no, I'm kind of exaggerating, Brent. But for the most part, Alex was. It became one of these interesting things where when the Envy of None project started, he was, let's just say, sort of passively very interested in it, and it was very casual, and we were laying guitar parts down and sharing files and stuff. And the further along that we got with the project, the more vocal that he came to me saying, this stuff is turning out so good, Andy, we have to do something with it. What are we going to do? Because we never even had a plan, like, are we going to shop a deal or what are we going to do with this, And we were sort of writing, I know it sounds odd in this day and age, but we were writing for the sheer joy of just collaborating and having fun. And then, and it wasn't until we were about 6 songs in, Alex was like, what are we doing with this stuff anyway? Are we shopping it, right? Mm-hmm. So what we did was when we had about 6 songs completed, he said to me, a lot of this stuff sounds like it could be really good for film and television in it. And he kept using the words like very soundtracky, very cinematic. And he said, Andy, don't you have some friends that are, film supervisors, and they do sync and licensing for television and commercials and TV and film? And I said, yeah, I do. I've got quite a few contacts. He said, why don't you send them send a couple songs out and see what they think. And Brent, I'm not even lying. Like I sent maybe 4 or 5 songs out to some film supervisors that I know in Canada. And within 24 hours, I got some really good response, including one from a girl out in Vancouver named Natasha Dobrinsky. And she said, Andy, I love the song Liar. And I'm working on a Netflix series right now called Pretty Little Things. And I think it would be perfect for one of the episodes. It's like not a ton of money, but it's some good bragging rights for you. Or you guys own the masters still and all the publishing. And at that time we hadn't inked a record deal yet. So I called all the other members and said, what do you guys think about doing this? And everybody was up for it. But I think it gave us the confidence that maybe all of us weren't drinking the Kool-Aid and patting each other on the back going, boy, isn't this great? Like somebody outside the camp said, it gave us some validation that they really liked the material. So we kind of used that as a motivation to finish off the rest of the record. And that's what we did. So, that little sort of connection with Liar early on in this, which ended up being our first single that we released, ended up just being a nice shot in the arm and giving us a little bit of confidence maybe that we were on the right track.
Oh, it's fantastic. I've heard the song. It's got a very sinister, ominous aspect to it. Alex is right. It is very cinematic. The vocals are very ethereal and haunting. It's not, it's not Coney Hatch, that's for sure. But it's and that's cool. I mean, it's industrial sounding. It's got like a 9 Inch Nails flavor almost.
Yeah, I agree. And it certainly isn't Coney Hatch or Rush. And I think one of the things that's been liberating about this process, I know certainly Alex has been vocal about it, and I feel the same way. Just doing something in a different lane. And a lot of people, I know a lot of music fans, including myself, when you fall in love with a band or an artist, and then their new album comes out and you're like, this is nothing like what the other one was. And you either stay with the ride or you're like, well, I don't like the new direction. But for Alex and I to carve a new groove and just explore some different, a lot of it is very ambient. Like you said, there's electronic and industrial vibes to it. And Alex spent a lot of time crafting the guitar tones to try to make them sound like they weren't guitars, believe it or not, like putting processing on them and flipping them backwards and just making, like if I was to solo some of the tracks for you and you and I were in the studio together, you'd be like, wow, man, that sounds like keyboards. And I would, a lot of times I would call Alex and go, did you even lay guitars down on this? And he's like, yep. And that, that syncopated rhythmic part is me putting my guitar through multi-layers of processing, but he went out of his way, believe it or not, to make his guitar tracks sound not like guitar.
Oh, wow.
And he told me he had a lot of fun doing that. But, just to give you a bit of background on Liar, originally, I wrote that song quite some time ago. And I had been in touch with Dave Ogilvy from Skinny Puppy, and Dave had a band called Jackalope at the time. And he had called me up and said that he was looking for some new material for one of their records. And so I started messing around with Liar, with the fuzz bass and kind of like that 9 Inch Nails groove that you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And I called Dave up and I said, I'm going to send this to you. I think it might be perfect for Jackalope. And he said, well, thanks for that, Andy. But unfortunately, the band just broke up, and I don't know what's going on. So I just held on to the idea, Brent. And then when the time came to start working on new material, that was one of the ideas that I resurrected. It's an older one, but as you probably know, when you start getting different personalities involved in it and go to a Hall of Fame rock and roll guitar player and say, could you add some guitars on? And then it becomes a different beast. And with Maya, I just, for the whole project, wherever she was sort of short on lyric ideas or vocal ideas, I would sort of seed a little idea and then let her run with it. And that's exactly what she did with Liar. And I had a few little vocal lines and the chorus written, but ironically, she ended up getting called into jury duty in Portland, Oregon, and told me that she ended up getting asked to leave the jury for some reason because you know how they whittle the jury down. But she said she looked at this woman who had a laundry list of charges, and she knew that she was lying and had a very cold, sinister look in her, like a non-emotion vibe in her eyes. And Maya ended up writing the lyrics inspired by her sitting on a jury. Yeah,
that's so cool.
Yeah,
what a great story. I love that.
I know, right? Yeah.
But also, isn't it so cool that you and Alex were on the same page? I mean, I made the comment before about this not being Coney Hatch and certainly not Rush, but it's so cool that you guys had the same kind of vibe in mind. You came to him with it and he said, yeah, this is cool. I think that's really great.
I do too, Brent, and over the years with like my relationship with the boys at Rush goes right back to 1982 when Coney Hatch was signed to Anthem Records. And I would run into those guys at various events or if they were playing in town. And I've always been a Rush fan. I mean, I went to All the World's a Stage at Massey Hall back, when they recorded that. I'm dating myself, but I'm a huge Rush fan. So, and it was quite surreal being their label mates, but then getting to know the guys and being, forging a friendship with Geddy, Alex and Neil, but always with Alex, we shared a common interest and love in electronic music and ambient music and soundtracks, music for film and television. So for probably about 5 or 6 years, we had been talking about collaborating together just to write music for film and television. And we've actually done a few things. Like recently, there was a series about the Toronto Maple Leafs called 24/7 that was out on Amazon, and we ended up writing some music for that series together. The word is quietly getting out there that the two of us are interested in writing music for film and television. So it's been an itch that we wanted to scratch for quite some time, but I think really what happened was when Alex found out that I was working with Maya and I told him about it, and he said, boy, I'd really love to hear her voice and what you guys are up to. And he said to me, Andy, you've got something special here. This Maya is amazing. So we ended up really bonding over that and wanting to work with Maya. So she became the catalyst and a bit of the glue for the whole project that we had this mutual respect for this, at the time, 21-year-old woman who was singing these amazing melodies with all these crazy, layers of harmonies and everything. So that's really what cemented this project, The Envy of None. Just how impressed we were with Maya and her chops. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. Very, very cool. She's got a great voice.
Yeah, and I think the more tracks that come out, like Liar is certainly, I would say, one of the more immediate tracks on the record. But Brent, there's a lot of stuff that's really trippy and vibey. The next track that is going to be the next sort of single that will go out is a song called Look Inside. And it's a very trippy, the label says they call it a stoner lullaby. It's a very, very slow kind of dreamy stoner vibe with distorted bass and dreamy vocals on it. So I think the deeper we get into the album, I'm hoping that people realize that it's quite a broad stretch in terms stylistically.
Yeah.
And her vocal is the common thread running through all of it.
That's cool. I'm looking forward to hearing this record.
I'm sort of sitting in the sidelines going, I can't wait to hear what people think of the next one and the next one, but the master plan is to sort of have the next single come out, I guess, maybe, last week of February, first week of March, and then the full record comes out in April. So not too much longer to wait, Brent. It's going to be out there.
Yeah. And you guys are doing some cool stuff with vinyl too. It's you've got like an all white vinyl version, a baby blue version.
Yes, we do. Yeah. And the label, after that chapter with one of our songs getting on that Netflix series, we sort of took the approach that maybe as opposed to shopping a traditional record deal, we would find a small boutique label that might get what we're doing and might understand it. And so the label Snapper K-Scope, they're well known for Porcupine Tree. They do a lot of sort of proggy alternative stuff, and they were very well known for their box sets that they do. They do a lot of really elaborate box sets with different artists and different color vinyl, and so they were right out of the gate, they said, we'd like to do multiple colors of the vinyl. We'd like to do a deluxe edition. Do you guys have any additional material so we can add some bonus material? So there's going to be 2 or 3 different vinyl configurations of it, and it's going to come out on old school compact disc for anybody that remembers those. So yeah, but yeah, I think there's a white and a baby blue, and I think there's one or two other colors that are going to come out. So
cool.
And some of them will be exclusive to certain territories. Like I'm hearing the baby blue vinyl will only be for Canada and Germany and things like that. So yeah, it's going to be fun.
That's cool. Very cool. Yeah, I was having a look at the press kit that I got, and I also noticed something very funny. Actually, your picture, I noticed that you're rocking a Creem Boy Howdy T-shirt in the pic.
Yes, you
cool.
know, well, that's cool that you noticed it. And I'm a bit of a swag hound. I love different band T-shirts. Like I'm not afraid to wear a Boston T-shirt or a Tom Petty T-shirt or a UFO or a Scorpions or any of my bands. But, you know, I was trolling the internet one day and I saw some Creem magazine T-shirts and I was like, oh my God, I remember that magazine.
Oh yeah.
Like I kind of had a love-hate relationship with that magazine because there was that journalist Lester Bangs, I think was his name. And he just came off like a complete prick. Like he would trash a lot of my favorite bands or trash records that I loved, but there was something very rebellious about that magazine that I loved. And I loved the Stars cars. You know, I remember seeing photos of the guys in Aerosmith with their Corvettes and their Mercedes Benz and everything, but they kind of didn't give a crap about anybody or what they thought. It was like the anti-Rolling Stone magazine, and there's a documentary on Creem magazine. I don't know if you've had a chance to see it, but it's really well done, and it was just kind of like this little ma and pa magazine that kind of grew and started to create this cult following, but always wanted a Boy Howdy shirt and finally bought one last year.
Oh, it's cool. I got to get myself one. I follow them on Instagram and they've always got the swag on there and I never get around to it, but I've actually got to, you've pushed me on. I'm going to do it.
Yeah, I think you got it, man. Yeah. You got it. It's a cool logo, right? And those in the know who know Creem magazine and know how, there was certainly a very cynical vibe with that magazine, but man, like I'm going to go back to our first interview to tell you that at the root of everything I do, I'm a music fan. I always have been. I have a huge record collection. When I was a teenager, I had Circus magazine, Creem magazine, Hit Parader. I cut the photos out of all the bands that I loved and put them up on my wall, and that's the root of where I come from. So hell, man, if I can get a Creem magazine T-shirt in a heartbeat, I'm looking for a Circus magazine T-shirt now.
That would be cool. I haven't seen one of those. You know what I'd like? Did you like Kerrang magazine? Do you remember that one?
Yes, I did. And Kerrang were always very kind to Coney Hatch. Like we got a ton of love in Kerrang magazine.
You and I may have talked about that before. We talked about Paul Suter, who was the Canadian guy. I think like he loved Lee Aaron and Coney Hatch and a lot of the Canadian bands. Yeah.
He loved Anvil, and he was always talking about, Kick-Axe and all these different bands that came up in and around the time that Coney Hatch started. And there was you're right, there was absolutely a wave of Canadian bands that magazine, that metal magazine, just loved and championed. And and they were all great guys. And throughout our career with Coney Hatch, they always championed everything that we did.
Yeah. I remember reading about you guys in there, actually. I used to love that magazine.
Yeah, it was a good one for sure. And me too. And I'm a metalhead, so I would read it to hear what, Motorhead and Saxon and Crocus and all those bands were up to, right? Like so, and then I'd be like, oh my God, we're on the next page after Saxon. I love Saxon. I got Wheels of Steel.
Right? That must have been crazy.
Yeah, it was. I'm telling you, man, there were so many pinch me moments of my career where I'm like, oh my God, are we really here? Like when, Brent, when you've got a giant poster of Peter Frampton or Ted Nugent on your wall growing up, and then you end up being the special guest opening act, or Edgar Winter, same thing. I loved Edgar Winter, and actually meeting those guys or being on the bill with them or Cheap Trick. I'm like, in what lifetime does this happen? Right. And even to this day, even getting to work with Alex Lifeson, it's just it's a big pinch me moment. And I think I'm pretty blessed, man. I definitely have a lot to be thankful for. There's been some amazing, lots of ups and downs in my career, but some stuff that's just kind of storybook when you think about it.
Well, you do, but you also have a great attitude, Andy, and I've always appreciated that. That's not always the case. So good on you.
Yeah, thanks for saying that, dude. Yeah, I know. If you start believing in your bullshit, man, before you know it, you start alienating a lot of people. I'm happy to be making music after all these years. I just think it's such a nice been a great ride so far.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, we're happy you're doing it too, brother.
Thank you, man.
So I've got your tunes here. Let's get into these because these are good, man. I saw this list and I actually sent it back to your PR guy and with a bunch of exclamation marks because I was like, this is really
cool. well, we did, like on round one, we did some tunes that make your skin crawl. And I know I said to you at that time, man, I wish I could have 10. Can you give me 10 here?
Yeah.
So, when you asked me to do it again, I thought, okay, I'm going to stretch a little bit here. So, hit me with your questions and I'll tell you. I don't have the list in front of me, but certainly if you remind me, I'll tell you the reasons why they make my skin crawl in a good way.
All right. Well, here we go. Massive Attack. First one, Angel.
Okay. Well, first of all, that's a very apropos song to be talking about with Envy of None.
Yes.
Because it's that exploration into ambient, and you can call it what you want, ambient, trip hop, but the production on that I always really, really loved it because, there's a lot of heavy guitars on that song.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all layered in the background, but the atmospheric vocals, that whole record, that Mezzanine record, I ended up going to see Massive Attack maybe about a year and a half ago when they came to Toronto celebrating the 40th anniversary of that record. Mm-hmm. But I think, Brent, not only that song and just how beautiful and haunting the vocals are resonated with me, but just the production on that record and the soundscaping is something that I think was an inspiration, certainly for me, with the Envy of None stuff. And, mm-hmm. A lot of people, when they think about Coney Hatch or me or my knucklehead rock, 4 on the floor stuff, you don't think that that's the same guy that's going to be listening to Massive Attack or, Pat Metheny or Weather Report or stuff like that. But mm-hmm. I love all that kind of stuff. I'm a music fan at heart, like I told you,
Well, you know what? The thing about Massive Attack that I've always kind of considered is that they attract a wide berth of fans just because, like trip hop, there's elements of rave, there's elements of industrial, there's elements like even of metal and soul. And the production is super crisp all the time. It's atmospheric, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and if you do your homework on that record, it was certainly well received in Europe, but in Canada and the US, it took a while to catch on, but that thing exploded in Europe. And, 40 years later, I think, I could be wrong on this, but that 40th anniversary tour that they just did to celebrate the Mezzanine record was they sold out every single show.
Oh, and good.
And boy, could they reproduce it live too. Like they did a really great job. They must have had about 3 or 4 keyboard players on stage at once and a couple different vocalists. But there's so many beautiful moments on that record. I picked Angel just because it's the opening track and just such a haunting vocal on that track.
Yeah, it's great. Now here's a song, man. Next, you have Scorpions. He's a woman, she's a man. Well done. So great.
And quite a juxtaposition from going from Massive Attack to Scorpions, right?
Oh,
but I'm going to tell you that, Scorpions and UFO, for sure. I can remember, honestly, writing a letter to the Scorpions fan club, and they wrote me a letter back with a signed postcard with Rudolf Schenker and all those guys. But the attitude on that song and the guitar playing before I started to get into Michael Schenker, I think I really discovered Scorpions when I realized that Rudolf was Michael Schenker's brother because I loved UFO so much, right?
Yeah.
So then I started to go down the rabbit hole with the Scorpions, but with Uli John Roth's guitar playing and anybody that's a guitar player out there, there's a lot of Hendrix vibe in what he does, but
huge.
The subject matter of that song, when you think about what's happening now in the world with the transgender community and just that whole is it a guy? Is it a girl? Like that, you think about when that song was released and how ahead of its time it was, right? But I think in general, the reason that I absolutely love that song and crank it up in my car every time I can is just the vibe and the metal crushing vibe of that song. You know, it's just got such a great vibe to it.
Yeah, this is, I think, taken by force around like 77, 78.
Yes.
Yeah.
And absolutely. And the Scorpions live album, I think, was the one that kind of cemented it for me. And He's a Woman, She's a Man is on that one as well.
Yeah, Tokyo Tapes. Yeah.
You're right.
This predates Blackout, which was a good, like, heavy record.
Yes. And that might have been one, it was certainly one of the last records that Uli John Roth was on before he was replaced by Matthias Jabs. And, you know, his guitar, I went to see Uli John Roth when he came to Toronto recently, and,
cool.
and the guy's guitar playing is just off the map, you know, and a lot of people say that he's, you know, copped Hendrix too much, but my God, anybody that doesn't know about Uli John Roth, you know, you think about, there's a song called Sails of Charon.
Yeah.
And oh my God, like just like this, you know, Brent, what is that? Maybe like a 2-minute guitar intro before any vocal comes in. It's just like, I remember playing it for Ian Thornley when I was working with Ian and said, have you ever heard this guy? And he was like, who the hell is this band? And he was just gobsmacked when he heard the guitaring on it, you know. So anybody that hasn't heard those records, you should go back and listen to them.
Oh, yes. Highly, highly recommend. Absolutely.
Agreed.
Yeah, all those old Scorpions records are fantastic. James Gang is next. Stop, live 1971.
Yes. Okay, so first of all, I'm just a diehard Joe Walsh fan. Anything that Joe Walsh has ever done, I buy it. I loved his solo records. I loved, you know, the Smoker You Get, The Player You Drink, and Barnstorm, and I think that he breathed some new life in the Eagles when he joined the Eagles. It gave them a little bit of grit on it. But my love for James Gang kind of goes back to my early formative years when I was really trying to. I don't know how to read music. I never have. I certainly know the fretboard and I know the notes that I'm playing on it, but I don't have any grasp of any kind of theory or. I had a few lessons when I was growing up, but, you know, I was told to pay attention to a certain amount of bass players, and James Gang was one of them. And my sister's boyfriend turned me on to James Gang. And when I bought that James Gang live at Carnegie Hall, that's going back to 1971. Yeah. And I'm a bit of a closet guitar player, but, you know, the guitar playing on that is just ferocious. There's like Echoplex, and I would say it's Joe Walsh at his meanest. If you love Joe Walsh and you want to hear him really pushing the envelope, you should listen to that record, because the soloing and the echo and his use of just like the Leslie cabinets and his guitar playing is off the map, but the bass playing on it is spectacular. And it's a loud and proud 3-piece. So I would spend a lot of nights with my headphones on learning those bass lines. And that song called Stop is the opening track on the record, which I don't think is written by the James Gang, but it's an old blues competition or composition. And I just fell in love with that record, and I continue to listen to it to this day. It's one of my favorites. It's a desert island record for me, for sure.
Nice. Little known, so that's cool. I like that you had this in your list. I like this record too. The sweet wah solo on this tune too, right? Just so great.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And like I said, like I kind of I started playing bass because I was given a bass guitar for my 16th birthday by my sister's boyfriend. But truth be told, I always wanted to play guitar. I'm a closet guitar player, and I own guitars now, and I can hack my way around it. But my love of music stems from guitar heroes like Joe Walsh and Rick Derringer and Johnny Winter and Michael Schenker and you know those for me were my heroes, my early heroes, Peter Frampton, and I just ended up being a bass player. So I think I'm a closet guitar player, to tell you the truth.
You know, that's a great point. I mean, if you go back, you know, you're talking about Roth earlier, but like go back to that period of the 70s, you know, there are so many great players in there that are overlooked often. You got to do a little digging, but there's some good stuff in there.
I agree, and I know I'm going off track here, but with like a band like The Sweet, everybody knows them for Ballroom Blitz and action and stuff like that. But any drummers out there, if you want to listen to the closest to John Bonham, then go back and listen to albums like Give Us a Wink, I think was the name of the record. But the drummer for The Sweet is just unbelievable. And the musicianship and some of the guitar work, like you said, of these bands in the 70s,
Yep.
A lot of them very, very overlooked,
Yeah. It's funny. You just reminded me of, I was thinking about Leonard Skinner because, I was watching this documentary the other night and people said, well, you've heard Freebird, you've heard Sweet Home Alabama. A lot of people just think that that's a Skinner. But when you listen, you go through those old records, and I love doing this with bands like Grand Funk Railroad,
Oh, yeah.
Go through and listen to their early stuff, right around the second, third record, like with Skinner, Nothing Fancy. I don't know if you know that record, but there's a song
I
on
do.
there. Do you know,
I'm a big Skinner.
There you go, like On the Hunt.
Skinner fan. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Great song, but nobody would ever know it.
I almost wanted to put "Give Me Back My Bullets" on my list, but you've got me going now because you talk about Allman Brothers and Leonard Skinner, and a lot of those were very guitar driven. You got 3 guitar players in the band, and somebody asked me, if you died and came back, which band would you like to play bass in? And it's a toss up between Skinner and Cheap Trick for me.
Nice. That's cool.
Just because I think I could pull off the Skinner with a cowboy hat and just be a badass with maybe just like a jean vest with no shirt on. I could pull that off back in the day. I love Skinner.
Me too. We're gonna jump forward here with Stone Temple Pilots next and Sex Type Thing.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting as I tell you about the ride coming from sort of Coney Hatch and maybe my growth as a musician as I sort of went, like, I'm not going to say I got tired of the sort of formula Coney Hatch stuff, but when the alternative bands started to come out, like Stone Temple Pilots or Pearl Jam or Nirvana, like that spelled the depth of a lot of us that were in the hair metal scene or the hard rock scene. But instead of being afraid of it, I actually embraced it. I mean, I love bands like King's X and Stone Temple Pilots for me were the attitude and Scott Weiland's vocals and that riff, that sex type thing riff is relentless. And when I was lucky enough to see Stone Temple Pilots play in Toronto, I think at a place called the Warehouse, and just watching Scott Weiland sing that song, and he had his megaphone, and by far one of the finest rock frontmen in the world, in my opinion, and just like that, and that riff, and when it came out, it just jumped out of the speakers, and there's a lot of, like, I own a lot of STP records, and I think they're a really, really great band that there's not a lot of bands from the 90s that stood the test of time, in my humble opinion, but I think STP is one of them that did.
I agree. This song is a ripper,
Yeah.
I've always loved it. I used to play in a band, and we used to play this, and it was just like one of the highlights of rehearsal.
There's nothing subtle about that one. It just like falls to the wall. It's like a punch in the face, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh yeah. But and if you think about this, to your point, a lot of, like, Alice in Chains was this way too, right? They kind of cut their teeth during, the 80s and the metal era. The songs are just kind of slightly reworked with zero image, right? You listen to a song like Man in the Box or Sex Type Thing, like, you can see that there is a connection to what came before it.
I totally agree. And it's funny that you brought fashion into it, because if anything, you look at Pearl Jam and some of these bands that, the grunge bands that were, there was no eye makeup. There was no hairspray. There was nothing. It was almost like an anti-glam movement, that it was sort of like the man in the street. You can wear a plaid shirt, but you're right that the hard rock roots of Alice in Chains or Stone Temple Pilots or Pearl Jam, or the list goes on and on. They're there, and I think it was just gift wrapped with some different clothing on it. To be honest with you,
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And the production was a lot more raw. Like, I think they got away from the big reverbs and the big layered harmonies and the Def Leppard, wall of sound stuff, and it became a little bit more real, a little bit more like a garage band, or like maybe like the next generation of the punk movement, but not as bloated, you know?
Yeah, bloated is a great word to describe that, because if you think of some of the bands that were around, in 1991, 1992, it was almost like that movement kind of, got crushed under its own bloat. It just got a bit too ridiculous. And that's where this came from. The pendulum swung way the other way, I think.
Well, I think you're right. And I read some interesting things where I think it was maybe Tommy Lee. It was sparring with maybe somebody from Pearl Jam or something, talking about how boring the grunge movement was. And
Nikki Sixx, yeah.
Oh, Nikki Sixx, yeah, like how bored they looked, right? And I guess, there was that anti-metal movement that you were talking about. And I had to live through it, man, because, I had my I guess my No Tattoos band, and then, the Soho 69 thing. And I can remember the moment, because we were playing in Montreal, and we had some really nice girls that we knew in Montreal, and they took us out that night to a club called the Electric. I think it was called, the English translation was the Electric Ass, and it was a club. It was a club that played really cutting edge new music, and that night they were cranking Smells Like Teen Spirit, and I fell in love with it. But at the same time, I thought, oh my God, Curran, you better get on your horse, man, because the world's a changing here, and I don't think No Tattoos is going to cut it anymore.
That record was still cutting it in my dorm room, I'll tell you that. Nickels and Dimes got a lot of airplay, my friend.
Thank you for saying that, Bob. But you know what I mean, right? Like, music is constantly changing, and I like that challenge. I like trying to reinvent what the ride's all about. Yeah. Like you said, like Envy of None is not Coney Hatch. It certainly isn't, and it's been fun to be able to stretch, and so the grunge and the alternative bands, I loved it. I embraced all of it, man. There was a ton of great bands. King's X for sure were on the top of the list for me too.
I don't know a lot about that band, but I did like what I heard.
Well, Doug Pinnick, the lead vocalist, and left-handed black bassist, and they were a Christian band, but you would never know it. But one of the most soulful singers in the music industry, I think. And anybody that, Dog Man, if you said, Andy, which record should I listen to? If you, go find a copy of Dog Man with King's X, and I guarantee you'll become an instant fan.
Okay, there you go. Done. Homework for me. Your last tune, my friend, Jeff Beck, because we've ended as lovers, blow by blow, I think. Yeah.
Well, when you sort of laid out my homework as songs that make your skin crawl, to this day, there's still a lot of songs that give me goosebumps, and I'll look at my arm and I can see the hair standing up on it. There's just that connection that just, you're like, oh my God, I love this. Right. And that Jeff Beck record, and I certainly got into what I'd call more maybe progressive. I don't know, like the Jeff Becks and the Stanley Clarks and Pat Metheny and Weather Report, and a lot of it was based on me wanting to learn what Jaco Pastorius, the bass player, was doing, or Stanley Clark, or everything. But that fusion rock, I've always loved Jeff Beck. I loved Beck, Bogert, and the Peace, and I had some Jeff Beck group albums with that Rod Stewart was the lead vocalist on. Yeah. But again, there's the Closet Guitar Hero coming out, where I bought everything that Jeff Beck did. But the soloing and the expression and how he made his guitar talk. There's no vocals on that entire record, and that "'Cause We've Ended as Lovers" was always such a sweet, melancholy moment. There's nothing aggressive about it, but it just, I still had goosebumps when I listened to that track, Brent. I absolutely love Jeff Beck. I've seen him a million times. My favorite lineup was when Terry Bozzio was in the band, yep. Frank Zappa and Missing Persons. So, and I actually, a thrill of a lifetime was when I got to meet Jeff in person. Oh, wow. And in Montreal, and got my photo taken with him, and got him. He gave me a signed poster of when he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which is up in my studio. So Jeff Beck has been another big influence on just the fanboy in me. I don't think it really came out in the music, but I like if that guy, I would go, I'd do road trips to see him if I could, you know. It's one of those bands.
Dude, you have such a great attitude. I love it.
Well, thanks, buddy. We're a kindred spirit because it's the love of music that is the start of everything for me. That's the beginning of the ride.
You're absolutely right. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today, Andy. I really appreciate it, man.
Brent, it's always a pleasure to be on with you. It's kind of like talking to an old friend over a couple of beers, except I've got a glass of wine going, and it's actually a really nice. You know, it's my dad's birthday today. God rest his soul. So it's a nice way to talk to a friend and talk about great music and listen, as the ride continues with Envy of None, if you want to do a part 3 down the line and we'll go deeper into my record collection, I'm always there for you, brother.
Yes, please. Let's definitely do that. I would love that. You're on.
That sounds great, Brent. Cheers, buddy. I appreciate it, man.
Cheers, Andy. Take good care. Thank you very much, and have a great evening, my friend.
You too, Brent. Take care, buddy, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Cheers, pal. Bye.
All right. This has been No Sleep Till Sudbury with Brent Jensen and my very, very special guest, Mr. Andy Curran. Till next time, folks. Take good care.
Brent Jensen is the best-selling author of No Sleep Till Sudbury, Leftover People, and All My Favorite People Are Broken. All titles available in stores and on Amazon worldwide.